Have you ever wondered what really happened inside the Conjuring house? The truth they never dared to film? In 1991, decades after the infamous Perron family haunting, the Conjuring house stood silent and abandoned in rural Harrisville, Rhode Island. Its windows, like vacant eyes, stared out from beneath the skeletal branches of ancient trees, holding secrets that whispered on the wind. That is, until a psychology graduate student named Elena Whitmore, driven by a morbid curiosity and an academic ambition, began her thesis on real-world possession cases and mental breakdown. But what began as dispassionate research, a mere intellectual exercise, soon became a nightmare beyond her darkest theories, a descent into a reality far more terrifying than any case study. Elena, at 26, was brilliant, sharp-witted, but carried a hidden fragility beneath her skeptical exterior. Her mother's suicide years prior had left a gaping wound, a raw vulnerability she tried to mask with academic rigor. She saw the Conjuring house not as a locus of evil, but as a psychological puzzle, a crucible for human delusion and fear. Armed with her recording equipment, EMF meters, and a healthy dose of scientific skepticism, she arrived in Harrisville in the crisp autumn of 1991, the air already carrying the scent of decay and damp earth. The house itself was a character, a sprawling, decaying farmhouse that seemed to breathe with a heavy, ancient sigh. Its paint peeled like sunburnt skin, and the porch sagged, threatening to collapse under its own weight. As Elena approached, a profound silence descended, broken only by the crunch of her boots on fallen leaves. There were no birds, no distant sounds of traffic, just an oppressive quiet that pressed in on her, a stillness that felt less like peace and more like a held breath. She unlocked the heavy front door, the rusty hinges groaning in protest, a sound that echoed unnaturally through the empty halls. The air inside was cold, stagnant, thick with the scent of damp wood, dust, and something else, something cloying and metallic, like old blood. Her flashlight beam cut through the gloom, revealing peeling wallpaper, overturned furniture, and a pervasive sense of abandonment. This was it, the infamous Conjuring house, her new research subject, her new home for the foreseeable future. As she set up her equipment in the living room, a strange chill permeated the air, causing goosebumps to prickle on her arms. Her digital audio recorder, state-of-the-art for 1991, suddenly emitted a high-pitched whine, its display flickering erratically. She frowned, checking the batteries, but they were fresh. Then, the playback light on the recorder flashed, and a distorted guttural sound, played in reverse, filled the room for a split second before the device powered down completely. "What the hell?" Elena muttered, tapping the recorder. It remained stubbornly dead. She tried her EMF meter, but it too sputtered, its needle jumping wildly before settling on 0, then spiking again. It was as if the very energy of the house was fighting her technology, rejecting her scientific intrusion. She tried to rationalize it as old wiring, electromagnetic interference, anything but what her gut instinct was screaming. She moved into the kitchen, the silence of the house pressing in on her. As she poured herself a glass of water, She caught a glimpse of movement in the reflection of the dark window pane, a shadow, impossibly tall and thin, darting across the hallway behind her, against the faint light filtering through a distant window. She whirled around, but there was nothing, only the empty, dust-filled corridor. Her heart hammered in her chest. That night, as she tried to sleep on a makeshift cot in the living room, the house began to whisper. It wasn't a distinct voice, but a low, sibilant murmur that seemed to emanate from the very walls, from the floorboards. Beneath her, from the darkness itself. It was her name, she realized, Elena, drawn out and distorted, a chilling, intimate invitation. The whispers grew louder, weaving through her dreams, pulling her into a restless, terrifying sleep. She woke with a gasp, drenched in sweat, her mind reeling from a vivid nightmare. In the dream, she was standing in the cellar of the house, surrounded by figures shrouded in darkness, and a voice, ancient and cold, spoke her name, promising her a vessel. She shook her head, trying to clear the lingering terror, but the feeling of being watched, of being chosen, was palpable. The demonic entity that once haunted the Perron's Bathsheba, a witch said to have cursed the land in 1863, was never truly exorcised. Instead, it had learned to hide, to wait. It had observed, it had adapted, and now it wanted Elena. It wanted her as its new vessel, a fresh conduit for its ancient malevolence. The house wasn't just haunted. It was a living, breathing entity, and it had opened its doors specifically for her. The house didn't just whisper Elena's name. It began to sing it, a chilling, discordant lullaby that seeped into her waking hours, twisting the mundane into the utterly terrifying. The moment Elena crossed the threshold, her equipment hadn't just malfunctioned. It had become a conduit for something ancient and malevolent. Audio recordings reversed themselves, playing back distorted screams and guttural incantations that were never spoken. Shadows moved against the light, not just fleeting glimpses, but deliberate, elongated forms that danced on the periphery of her vision, mocking her attempts at scientific detachment. One morning, Elena found her voice recorder playing back a segment from the previous night. Instead of her own notes, a child's voice, high and mournful, whispered, "She never left the basement." Then, the recording abruptly reversed, the words blurring into an incomprehensible demonic growl. Elena snatched the device, her hands trembling. "What is this?" she muttered, her skepticism rapidly eroding. She knew she hadn't recorded that. The house itself seemed to become animate. She would find doors she had locked now ajar, windows she had closed now wide open, letting in the biting autumn wind. Footsteps echoed in the empty upstairs rooms when she was alone in the living room. Heavy, deliberate steps that seemed to pace back and forth, directly above her. She started sleeping with a flashlight clutched in her hand, its beam her only comfort against the encroaching darkness. Then came the scripture. One afternoon, Elena returned from a brief trip to town for supplies to find her bedroom wall, previously bare, now covered in sprawling black script. It was Latin, ancient and intricate, bleeding from the plaster as if written in fresh ink. She hadn't written it, couldn't have. Her hands shook as she translated a few lines. "The vessel is prepared. The blood will bind. She is the chosen. The words chilled her to the bone, confirming her deepest fears. Every mirror in the house became a terrifying oracle. As she looked into her own reflection, the image would subtly shift. Her eyes would darken, her smile would twist into a grotesque rictus, and her hands would move, performing actions she hadn't yet done, a hand reaching for a knife, a noose tightening around a neck, a shovel digging into the earth. They were glimpses of a horrifying future, or perhaps a horrifying present she was yet to fully inhabit. "No," she whispered, backing away from a cracked mirror, her reflection smiling back with a chilling, knowing grin. "That's not me." The demonic entity, Bathsheba, the witch who had cursed the land in 1863, was never truly banished. She had learned to hide, to wait, a parasitic intelligence observing from the shadows. She had seen countless families come and go, but Elena was different. Elena carried a vulnerability, a grief, a connection that Bathsheba recognized. The house was her web, and Elena was the fly, slowly ensnared. Elena tried to call her estranged brother, Jonas, an ex-seminarian who had abandoned his studies after their mother's death. She needed his pragmatic mind, his grounding presence, but the phone lines were dead, a constant mocking dial tone the only reply. The house was cutting her off, isolating her, preparing her for something unspeakable. The whispers grew more insistent, now forming fragmented sentences, promises of power, of belonging. If only she would yield. She began to see a girl in her dreams, a pale, ethereal child with wide, haunted eyes. "I never left the basement," the girl would whisper, her voice echoing with a profound sadness. "She won't let me leave." Elena would wake up in a cold sweat. The image of the girl, Cora, burned into her mind. A new layer of dread added to the already suffocating atmosphere of the house. The house itself seemed to breathe around her, the floorboards groaning, the walls creaking, a living, malevolent presence. Elena found herself talking to it, pleading with it, trying to understand what it wanted. "What do you want from me?" She'd scream into the empty rooms, her voice swallowed by the oppressive silence. The only answer was the chilling laughter of the grinners, echoing from the corners of her vision, their translucent forms flickering in the periphery. This wasn't just a haunting. It was a siege. Bathsheba wasn't just a ghost. She was a predator, and Elena was her prey, meticulously cornered, psychologically broken, and slowly, irrevocably, being prepared for the ultimate possession. The whispers were no longer just whispers. They were commands, subtle suggestions that began to feel like her own thoughts, eroding her will, preparing her for the final terrifying surrender. The whispers became commands, the reflections became premonitions, and Elena began to lose time. At first, it was just minutes, fleeting moments she couldn't account for, like waking from a brief, disorienting dream. Then, it stretched into hours. Entire blocks of her day vanishing into a terrifying void, leaving her with a chilling sense of dread and a growing fear of what she might have done, or what might have been done through her. The house was no longer just haunting her. It was consuming her, piece by agonizing piece, eroding her sanity with terrifying precision. One night, she woke with a jolt, not in her makeshift bed, but in the damp, freezing cellar of the house. The air was thick with the scent of decay and something else, something ancient and earthy. Her flashlight lay beside her, its beam illuminating grotesque shadows on the rough stone walls. She had no memory of coming down here. Her heart hammered against her ribs as she looked around, her eyes wide with terror. Then she saw them, scattered across a dusty, overturned crate, old, faded photographs. They were sepia-toned, brittle with age, depicting families from centuries past, but as she picked one up, her breath hitched. The woman in the photograph, dressed in period clothing, looked exactly like her. The same eyes, the same jawline, a chilling, undeniable resemblance. And then another photo, and another, each one showing someone who looked like her, from different eras, different centuries. A voice, soft and insidious, began to whisper in her ear, a voice she knew intimately, a voice that tore at the deepest wound in her soul, her mother's. "Join us, Elena," it pleaded, mournful and sweet. "It's so peaceful here. You belong with us." Elena squeezed her eyes shut, shaking her head violently. "No, you're not real. My mother is dead." But the voice persisted, weaving through her thoughts, blurring the lines between memory and malevolent illusion. Just as the terror threatened to overwhelm her, a frantic knocking erupted from the front door upstairs. Elena scrambled up the cellar stairs, her legs weak with fear, and threw open the main door. Standing on the porch, drenched and distraught, was Jonas, her estranged brother. His face was a mask of worry. "Elena, I've been trying to reach you. What's going on? You called me, frantic, saying you needed help, that something was wrong." Elena stared at him, bewildered. I didn't call you, Jonas." Her mind raced, trying to piece together the missing hours, the fragmented memories. Had she called in during one of her blackouts? Was this another trick of the house? Jonas looked at her, his eyes filled with concern. "You sound terrible. You look haunted." He stepped inside, his presence a jarring intrusion into the house's oppressive atmosphere. Her mind fractured further. She no longer knew what was real. Were the demons possessing her, slowly taking over her body and mind? Or was she always meant to be one of them, a part of some ancient, inherited curse? The faces in the old photographs flashed in her mind, her own face staring back at her from generations past. The whispers of her mother intertwined with the chilling voice of Bathsheba, making it impossible to distinguish between grief and demonic influence. Then, a horrifying discovery. Jonas, searching for a working phone line, stumbled upon a hidden compartment in the study, revealing a stack of old audio tapes. They were labeled with the meticulous handwriting of Professor Calvin Reeve, her occult psychology expert, who had mysteriously vanished in the 80s. As Jonas played the first tape, Reeve's voice, once academic and composed, was now rambling, frantic, filled with a terrifying obsession. He spoke of the chosen vessel and bloodline bindings, of an ancient entity that sought to return through a specific lineage. Elena listened, her blood turning to ice. Reeves' research, his descent into madness, mirrored her own. And then, the chilling revelation. Reeve had discovered that Elena's family, the Whitmores, were distantly connected to Bathsheba's descendants. The possession wasn't random. It was inherited. A curse passed down through generations, waiting for the right moment, the right vessel. Elena was not just a victim. She was the culmination of a centuries-old plan, a destined sacrifice. "This is impossible," Jonas whispered, his face pale, the tape recorder clutched in his trembling hand. "Our family, a bloodline?" Elena could only stare at the wall where new Latin scripture had appeared, now glowing faintly, outlining a family tree that culminated with her own name. The house had chosen her, not by chance, but by blood, and the final act of the inheritance was about to begin. The chilling revelation of her inherited fate, etched in glowing Latin on the walls, propelled Elena and Jonas into a desperate, frantic attempt to escape. The house, now a living, breathing maw, seemed to tighten its grip, the air growing thick, with an almost palpable malevolence. Their only hope lay in severing the ancient bloodline, a desperate gamble against a force that had waited centuries for its chosen vessel. The escape attempt began with a terrifying incident. Jonas found Elena sleepwalking towards the old well behind the house, a frayed rope clutched in her hand, her eyes vacant and distant. A noose, crudely fashioned, dangled from the well's rusty pulley. He tackled her, pulling her back from the precipice, her body cold and unresponsive in his arms. "Elena, what are you doing?" He screamed, his voice raw with terror. She blinked, slowly, her eyes regaining a flicker of recognition. But the horror of the moment was undeniable. They knew they couldn't simply walk away. The house wouldn't let them. It was a prison, and Bathsheba its warden. Their only chance was to fight back, to find a way to break the curse. They frantically searched the house, guided by fragmented whispers and the chilling insights from Professor Reeves' tapes. The tapes spoke of an ancient ritual, a counter-curse, hidden within the house itself that after hours of desperate searching, Jonas discovered a loose floorboard in the attic, hidden beneath decades of dust and forgotten belongings. Beneath it, wrapped in brittle yellowed cloth, was an ancient leather-bound book, its pages filled with more Latin script and disturbing illustrations. It was a grimoire, a book of dark rituals, and within its pages lay the key to their survival. The ritual was complex, horrifying, and utterly terrifying. It required a blood sacrifice, not of a life, but of a bond, a severing of the inherited connection. As Jonas read the final line, his voice trembling, Elena stood before him, her arm outstretched, a silver dagger glinting in the dim light of the attic. The ritual demanded a cut, a symbolic severing of the bloodline, a sacrifice of their shared heritage. As Jonas uttered the last syllable, a guttural roar erupted from the depths of the house, shaking the very foundations. The air grew impossibly cold, and the Latin script on the walls pulsed with an angry, malevolent light. Elena, her eyes wide with terror, suddenly screamed not in pain from the ritual, but in chilling, uncontrollable laughter. It was a sound that was not her own. a high-pitched manic cackle that filled the attic, echoing with a profound, ancient glee. Jonas dropped the book, his face paling with dawning horror. The demon had tricked them. The ritual wasn't to banish the entity, it was to release it from the house. Bathsheba had manipulated them, used their desperate hope as a key to unlock her ancient prison. The laughter continued, growing louder, more triumphant, emanating from Elena's very being. The double doors of the house's main entrance, previously bolted shut, swung open with a violent crash, revealing the moonlit forest outside. But the forest was no longer just trees. It was burning, without fire, a spectral blaze that consumed the leaves and branches in silent, ethereal flames. And from the dark maw of the cellar, something ancient began to walk out. It was not Bathsheba, not the witch they had prepared for, but something far older, far more primordial, a shadowy, formless horror that had been tethered to the land, now unleashed. Jonas stood frozen, watching in horror as Elena, her body racked, with the demon's laughter, began to walk towards the burning forest, her eyes fixed on the ancient entity emerging from the cellar. He screamed her name, but his voice was swallowed by the infernal crackle of the spectral flames and the demon's triumphant cackle. He had brought her here, and now he had unleashed something unspeakable upon the world. He turned and ran, the chilling laughter and the silent burning forest his last terrifying memories of the Conjuring house.